Quick intro to this video. This is an interview with Dr. William Noah. He is a sleep specialist. He has his own sleep lab. He's also an inventor of the VCOM. Now in this video, we discuss things such as the VCOM. We also discuss a new device that he has already invented called the KPAP, stands for Kairos Positive Air Pressure. We also talk about a whole host of other things, including the flawed APAP algorithm, Bilevel for the use of treatment of upper airway resistance syndrome. We talk about, of course, VCOM and a lot of the research that he's done going into the development of VCOM as well as KPAP. So throughout this entire video, there are nuggets of things. Despite it being an hour and 5 minutes long, there are little nuggets of information that I think are absolutely fascinating. And being in the field for such a long time, hearing other people's opinions on them, and how there's sleep physicians that have such dramatically differing opinions. And I'm talking about mostly things such as upper airway resistance syndrome. It's very interesting to hear people who are both sleep researchers have such dramatic differences of opinions on things such as upper airway resistance syndrome. Now, most of you who watch this channel know that what my opinions are on things, so I push back on some things just to get an opinion, and then I pretty much leave it there. But ultimately, I just want to hear what Dr. Noah has to say about these topics. One more thing I want to add is Dr. Barry out of Florida is going to have a presentation on APAP. I've been grinding videos on why APAP is terrible. Dr. Barry, who is a known researcher, actually the medical director I used to work with, trained under him, he's going to have a presentation. I'm going to leave the link for that in the description box below. You guys can go ahead and sign up there if you'd like to watch it. And one last thing before the video starts, please check out cpapsupplies.com. They're going to have, come September 22nd, there's going to be a new discount code. It is Lanky Fall, LANKYFALL. You can save 25% off all masks and accessories, including VCOM. Thank you for doing this interview with me. When I first discovered VCOM, I was trying to help someone out with their PAP therapy. I had never heard of VCOM prior to this, and this guy was having horrible problems. He lived in Salt Lake City. Could not figure anything out, super thin, was having with any pressure increases. Well, either if he was too low, he was having problems with just clear obstructive events. If he went any higher, he was having really clear, like Cheyne-Stokes respiration. And then all of a sudden, everything, he said, hey, look at my data. Everything was completely fixed. Everything was flat. I saw no arousals in there. It's like, what did you do? And he goes, I got this thing called VCOM. I'll send you the white papers for it. And so that's when I reached out to you guys. I was like, can I get a VCOM? Because what is this thing? And to be honest with you, I was like looking at it saying, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. It makes no sense to me. I got to try it for myself. And I put it in my own circuit. And I'm like, I was just like, wow. And all of a sudden, like I was an overnight believer in it. But what got you to actually create VCOM?
Well, it's an easy story. I was a normal practicing sleep doctor who basically, read the journal articles, worked hard on adherence. We had just in January 21 just published a large study with 4,000 patients looking at adherence and looking at ways to get greater adherence. Most everything we did was interventional as behavior, trying to change attitudes, educate, troubleshoot. We monitored and intervened quickly, did all the things that are in the literature. And one of the manufacturers, one of the duopoly heads of their, let's say, whole division, came to Nashville and wanted to know why I didn't use their mask. And I used all their blowers. And I basically said, look, I don't make that decision. I let the patients and our respiratory therapists and sleep techs make that decision. I guess I never really thought there was any science in the mask. I made everyone get nasal pillow because of the physics, and we can talk about that later, but that was my only real requirement, but the patient chose at the end with our sleep techs and respiratory therapists. And I said, basically, if your reps can't outsell the other manufacturer to my staff, that's your problem. I went home and I'm like, gosh, that was rude. And he's already got our blower business. And actually, then they had a recall, 2 months later. So it really got me thinking. And so I took this room down here. It's about 1,200 square feet, and it's my office, and conference table over there became the lab bench. I got every mask, every machine. I sat down with my whiteboard over here and just started playing, reading all the old literature again. I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. You know, is there something we can do in the technology of the machine? Because we always just basically trusted the manufacturers. We thought they really knew what they were doing. And what I soon realized, in my opinion, is they didn't. Physicians weren't involved, engineers were making all the decisions, and they think they understand the physiology. They obviously didn't. So that was April of 21. And in the first part of July of 21, I actually had students over at the local university 3D print the first VCOM. And really it took me 6 months, Jason, to convince myself that I was right. Because as a pulmonologist, as well as a sleep physician, I was, so believing that you had to ventilate everything. If you're a hammer, everything's a nail. Well, if you're a pulmonologist, you ventilate everything. And my dog wants out. I'm going to have to stop for a
Yep,
second.
no problem.
He's going to start making noises over here.
No
He's my
problem.
research assistant.
That's fine. My cat's my business partner, so we're
Well,
good.
mine, I have I have great pictures of him with a nasal pillow mask on. So he didn't like it. That was a couple of years ago, but that's where I got started. So I made the first VCOM, and going through the literature, I connected to one of the main engineers at Philips, who really was a theoretical guy. I mean, he's been doing it for 30 years. I was able to convince him, some of my peers, then eventually thought, well, let's just introduce it. The best way to convince the field that we've been wrong all these years, or I don't say wrong, but focused in the wrong place of the respiratory cycle, is to release the VCOM and just see what happens. So got it FDA cleared, and on June of 22, really less than a year from when I made the first prototype,
Yeah.
we released it at APSS and started getting unusual reactions. What do you mean drop inspiratory pressure?
Yeah.
So that's really the simple story.
I heard a lot of criticisms to it right when it came out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever gone to like forums and such, but they're opinionated, as you'd expect. A lot of the people, one of the complaints was, and I actually already I think I read your response to it, of how do you know this doesn't mess with the algorithms? And I saw that you did a small trial and saw that the APAP algorithms, like it just behaved the same with and without VCOM. Is that accurate?
Yeah. In fact, that paper's out earlier in the summer, and we took 100 patients, 60 ResMed, 20 React, 20 Philips, long-term users, with greater than 6 hours usage per night. Actually, it was over 7 hours average per group. We had them do 4 nights on APAP without VCOM and 4 nights with VCOM, and their P90 or P95s were unchanged. Therapy's unchanged, then if the pressure's unchanged. So no change in therapy. The VCOM actually decreased leak by a third, which was clearly statistically significant. It actually reduced the AHI, which really it was statistically significant, but not clinically,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what was interesting, these patients that were averaging 7.5 hours a night, they increased their usage time each night by 20 minutes with the VCOM. So it's real. And the way to think about it is, when you breathe in right now, you're dropping your inspiratory pressure. You have lower inspiratory pressure. 7 billion people are breathing right now with lower inspiratory pressure and higher expiratory pressure. That's how humans breathe. That's a natural experience. When you're on CPAP, in theory, if you gave equal pressure, inspiratory and expiratory, if IPAP and EPAP, inspiratory pressure, EPAP, expiratory, I'm sure you know this, but if you're going to play this sometime. So if your IPAP and EPAP are equal, then that's really CPAP. It's a continuous pressure, the same pressure the whole time. But humans don't breathe that way. They don't breathe with positive pressure. You breathe with negative pressure. Well, now, if you're using EPR or a bilevel device, they can only be with higher inspiratory pressure. And this goes back to the 1990 study by my good friend Mark Sanders. And they had the idea that people are having trouble breathing out with CPAP. And we'll talk about why that is. It's just simple physics, why they have that. It has to do with surface area. And so they thought, well, look, if we could lower the expiratory pressure, maybe we could raise the inspiratory pressure above that, like we do when we ventilate someone. Anytime you have inspiratory pressure higher than expiratory, you're putting more air into the lung than you're taking out. You're augmenting ventilation. You're taking work away from the diaphragm or the breathing muscles. There's data here in the 80s, and I'll share my screen and just show you here. So this whole idea is giving higher inspiratory and lower expiratory, because that's what we do in the ICU. and so Bilevel came out, and then of course C-Flex and EPR are the children of it. If you look right here, study from UPenn, Schwab et al. Back in '96, here's the airway with 0 pressure, room air. Now you put 5 centimeters, you notice on 5 and 10, you notice it doesn't increase the anterior posterior diameter. It doesn't push, can't push spinal cord out of the way, and it's not pushing the tongue back in place like a mouthpiece would or the palate, okay? It basically creates an alternate channel, like a freeway around the city, here laterally in the more compliant walls of the lateral walls of the pharynx. So you can see as the pressure goes up, the airway gets larger, right? And that's what you're wanting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's just CPAP. Over here, this CT study by Gugger and Vaught, you look, this spontaneous breathing, here's the size of the airway, here's the spinal cord, here's tongue-based palate. And you see when they put them on CPAP, see how it extends laterally into these folds, all right? It doesn't really increase the AP diameter, it's going here laterally. It's a whole different physiology that people aren't really thinking about. I certainly wasn't. And until I went back and looked at all this. So what's really fascinating is when you go to BiPAP, it's larger here than the spontaneous, but it's much smaller than CPAP. Well, why is that? Now look over here. This is cross-sectional area on the y-axis. Spontaneous breathing, that means no pressure, CPAP and BiPAP. And look, the cross-sectional area goes way up with CPAP, but it drops way down with BiPAP. Why? Because you're dropping expiratory pressure. It's the expiratory pressure that determines the diameter of the airway, particularly the end expiratory pressure. And so what are you doing with Bilevel? Well, here's what you're doing. It's simple. You're making the airway smaller when you drop EPAP, all right? You're making it more unstable. You're making more obstruction, all right? Now, well, then how are you treating the sleep apnea? Well, because you're giving the higher IPAP, you're forcing flow over the obstruction that you caused. It's absolutely backwards. Now, if this backwards way of treatment made sense, in other words, you make the problem worse, you make the airway smaller, and then you jam air over it. If it worked, then it'd be fine, but it didn't. All the randomized trials show it didn't increase adherence. Is it more comfortable to some people? Yes, obviously you're dropping the expiratory pressure. It's easier to exhale. But did it increase long-term adherence? No. Does it make the airway more stable? No, it makes the airway more unstable. Does it reduce side effects? No, it increases side effects because it causes treatment emergent. It causes more aerophagia. It causes more leak when you have higher inspiratory pressure.
So I have a couple. Let me ask you a couple of questions with that.
Oh, okay.
Can you go back? Can you go back to that other image?
We got to get to this slide because this is
okay.
Go ahead.
Can you go back to the other slide?
Yeah, sure can.
So with that was that's on these images to the right are on EPAP or EPAP. Does Bilevel look different with IPAP?
So these images are on. This is spontaneous breathing up here, the top one.
Right.
On CPAP, and I think it's 10 centimeters. And this is on Bilevel where they reduce the EPAP.
But are these images on exhalation or inhalation?
Interesting point. Well, these clearly are. I think the images are. I'm sure they're end exhalation. I would think so.
That's what I'm assuming, just because it's EPAP. But I just wanted to ask. So on inhalation, would Bilevel change then if the peak flow is? I mean, it's increasing by quite a bit.
That's really interesting. So I can answer that right away. So the inspiratory pressure does not open the airway. We know that from the original study that Mark Sanders did in 1990, that IPAP can't treat apneas. It can't open a closed airway. And so that's where this whole stuff came out. Oh, you treat apneas with expiratory pressure. And then once you get to that level, you treat hypopneas or partial obstructions with inspiratory pressure. And it's just wrong. the IPAP can't get there. You see what happens, we'll come back to that one. Where's my lung? Here it is. So if you look here, if your inspiratory pressure is 10, say you're 10 over 5 on BiPAP, and your inspiratory pressure is 10 at the mouth, it's not 10 in the pharynx. It's
Right.
probably 7 or 8, because you got to have a gradient. To get flow to go down here, you got to go to a lower pressure. So if you're 10 here, then the lung is going to drop, to 5, okay, at least. All right. Therefore, you're going to be somewhere 7, 7.5 in the airway. Now, when you exhale, the opposite happens. You drop to 5 here. Well, but if you stayed at 10, but if you drop to 5, you'd have to go up to 10 here to push the air back out. And you're going to have the same airway as 7. And so when you give 12, 15 of IPAP, you're not getting it in the airway. So let me show you this. This is a better example. This is Cyrier and Mark. This is a great study from 98. And look up here, here's the pressure. So here's CPAP, because the BiPAP is 11 over 11. They're the same, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And then you drop EPAP 1 to 10. It's 11 over 10, 11 over 9, 11 over 8. So IPAP stays the same in each of these scenarios. Now, here's the flow down here. All right, so you're leaving IPAP the same, okay? And look what happens. As you go just 1 centimeter, the flow drops. The height of this drop again, drops again. Look at this. This is the tongue muscle activation to try to open the airway. As you decrease, you have to increase activation trying to open the airway, because the reason this flow is dropping is because as you decrease EPAP, as I showed you on the previous slide with the imaging, you're making the airway smaller. You're making it unstable, and therefore the flow is going to decrease. Well, but the pressure gradient, having higher inspiratory over expiratory, will force more flow across the obstruction. And like I said, if this backwards way of making the airway more unstable than jamming flow over it improved adherence, fine. But it hadn't. It didn't. EPR
Can I ask you a
never did.
question? Can I ask you a
Yeah.
question with that?
Yeah.
So are you saying this is just in terms of obstructive apnea, or would you apply the same thing to something like upper airway resistance syndrome? Like
So upper airway resistance syndrome is a form of flow limitation. It has to do with any kind of flow limitation of the airway, because what you're wanting is you want this large airway over here where you don't have any flow limitation, whether it's upper airway resistance or whether it's hypopneas. So, think of it this way. You got an airway. When it's closed, obstructed, and you're making effort to breathe, and it's
Right.
obstructive sleep apnea. That's an apnea when it's closed. A hypopnea is when you have a narrowed, partially obstructed airway, but not completely obstructed. All right. So a hypopnea and what you call a RERA, or you're calling upper airways resistance, okay, are really the same thing. When you have flow limitation, you can, okay, well, I'll go back to this slide because it'll show it. When you have decreased flow, like over here, over 11 over 8, you can either, have decreased flow and have a hypopnea, right? We score where it drops. I remember in the lab, because your background's there, where you score that hypopnea, or the patient makes more effort. Look at the increased effort, the increased genoglossus, or they make more effort and they overcome the flow with more pressure gradient, and therefore they maintain flow. But they have an arousal from that increased effort. That's a RERA. So a RERA and a hypopnea are really just the different reaction to flow limitation. Make sense? You either have flow limitation, you don't increase your respiratory effort, and that's a hypopnea. Or you have flow limitation, you increase your respiratory effort, you maintain the flow, but you have an arousal because the increased effort. That's a RERA.
Can I push back on that just a little bit I just want to get your thoughts, honestly. Sure. So there's like I would say, what I found, I think, is that not everyone's different, or not everyone's the same. And I even one of my trainers from long ago was like, don't treat everyone the same. They're going to respond differently to different things. So I'm like, okay. There's some people I feel like, well, I don't feel like that I see it'll be just as you described. You keep increasing, and you have this continuum of obstructive apneas, hypopneas, RERAs, and a little more, it goes away, no more arousals. But there's, I would say, some people, and I would categorize them as the UARS folks. You go up, obstructive apneas, increased pressure, now they're hypopneas, increased pressure, now they're RERAs, keep increasing pressures, and they continue to have RERAs. that look the exact same. I'm talking like it'll be anywhere from 10 centimeters up to 15. Looks the
You're
same.
talking CPAP, or are you talking IPAP?
CPAP. And
Okay.
then if you add bilevel to those people, it goes away. And I would, this is going from Dr. Gimeno's research on this. This is a typical UARS profile that you would expect to see. They're thin, they have a low AHI, high RDI, someone you would look at and not say this person has any form of apnea, let alone, like UARS. But then bilevel, they seem to really respond to well. I just wanted your thoughts on that. Is that something you see in your lab or your practice?
No, I
Not at
will tell
all.
you, my point on the whole matter is there is no reason to use bilevel to treat OSA. No reason. There's no reason to use EPR. They may think it's more comfortable. They're used to it, fine. But when you reduce EPAP, you were dropping therapy down. And bilevel's unnatural. You're giving higher inspiratory pressure, where people normally breathe with lower inspiratory pressure. And it compromises therapy. You're destabilizing the airway. I don't know what happened in those cases, but the only reason to use bilevel to where you have pressure support and that where IPAP's higher than EPAP is for someone who not only has sleep apnea, but they have a need of ventilation, because that's what you're doing. You're ventilating. We don't need to ventilate sleep apnea because those patients can breathe okay. If they can't breathe okay, well, then they need ventilation. But when you're treating someone with ventilation who has sleep apnea, you titrate the EPAP up till you remove all their respiratory events at night, and then you give them whatever pressure support they need above that. And that's just that simple. BiPAP failed. EPR failed. It didn't increase adherence. All right. And they're unnatural. You're giving higher inspiratory. You're going to cause more side effects, more leak, we have shown, and you're going to lead to TEXA. We've known that since '05, Karen Johnson's study, that bilevel causes, much more central sleep apnea than CPAP. And of course, what we found, if you reduce inspiratory pressure even below, where you have the opposite of bilevel, where you're giving lower inspiratory, it actually resolves TEXA. It's just we have been doing it out of understanding the wrong physiology, and it's all right here from the 90s. We just missed it. We just missed it, and it found this great hole. Look, I was as guilty as anyone. I put everyone on C-Flex and then A-Flex, and if they were struggling, we tried to convert them to bilevel. We just believed the manufacturers. And then the manufacturers went even crazier in 2009 when they put mass compensation algorithms on the machine, because engineers are sitting there, and I know the ones who did it, they've talked to me personally about it, who first did it at Philips, and then of course, everyone else copied them, is they're like, oh, wow, this nasal pillow's got all this resistance. It's dropping the inspiratory pressure. We need to put mass compensation algorithms on. We need to set the dial so you can, turn down the inspiratory, turn down or maintain the inspiratory pressure. So what did they do? Well, now when you put on a nasal pillow, this little hole here creates a nozzle on your sprinkler. A nozzle on your hose to shoot the air out at a higher velocity. But now you're jacking up the pressure with a compensation algorithm, trying to compensate for the decreased pressure drop. And now you turn it into a pressure washer up the nose. So we were doing great with adherence in the 2000s. And then in the teens, when they put this on, well, guess what? People were having trouble tolerating nasal pillows because we were setting them on a nasal pillow until I figured that out. So we set every patient on a full face mask setting on the machine because it doesn't increase the pressure anymore, inspiratory, because there's not much resistance in a full face. But we put almost every patient on a nasal pillow or under the nose mask. And if we have to use a full face, we use an under the nose full face because less surface area and less leak and less clamping, less headgear is needed. So there was just this huge hole I walked into that was here. And, I've gone around the world and got most of the key opinion leaders to look at it and go, yeah, it's right. I mean, it's a great opportunity for improvement. Now we have an opportunity. We've been engineering machines to make them more uncomfortable the last 20 years, to make the airway more unstable.
So are you more or less against bilevel, with the exception of someone who has um, like hypoventilation, obesity syndrome, and things like what else would you categorize?
COPD,
COPD.
neuromuscular disease, anyone who needs ventilation, bilevel was one of the greatest advancements in our field for ventilation. It revolutionized home ventilation. It absolutely, it just didn't work for sleep apnea. It hasn't increased adherence. Look at the Cochrane analysis,
And you
all
would
the
say, and
randomized studies. Huh?
you don't consider upper airway resistance syndrome as being a separate
No,
uh,
no, upper
disease at
airway
all?
resistance syndrome is just flow limitation. I mean,
I need to send you some of so I've been collecting some. I need to send you some of it where they're not responsive to. I've even so start with CPAP, increase, add VCOM, increase, and the flow limitation remains until we switch to bilevel, and then it goes away. And they're like, oh, I feel great now. But their machine reported AHI it's still the same, but subjectively they're tired without, and with bilevel feel great, feel like $1,000,000. But it's not everyone. It's a
well,
small group.
if you had a fixed anatomic obstruction, like tonsils or polyps, something in the airway, you had a fixed obstruction to where increased expiratory pressure could no longer dilate the airway. Look at the pictures over here where you have your CPAP, or over here. If you had a fixed obstruction that no longer was going to, relieve itself, and you still had flow limitation, then the reason you fixed the flow limitation over the with bilevel is you just gave pressure support and you forced more flow over it, so your flow signal came back. All right, but the APAP did not change the diameter of the airway. It can't. Okay, and so it's too late. By the time the APAP fires, if the airway's gone, it's gone. So you mainly, because you're saying the flow limitation went away, and you're looking at the flow signal during your PSG, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you give pressure support, you're going to augment flow over that. If you give higher IPAP over EPAP, you're going to push more flow over. So if you got to the point that, say it was fixed, something you couldn't get the airway to increase in size anymore, and you still had flow limitation, then you could force more flow
and
over it. But
and
that's a rare
arousals too.
situation.
So I would say arousals as well as flow limitations go down. So the fewer the flow limitations, the fewer the arousals. And then adding bilevel eliminated both.
There could be, I could see that there could be a rare
it's
case
not a,
where that could be true. But that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing are patients who airway responds well to EPAP, and we're using bilevel or EPR, dropping expiratory pressure and making the airway smaller, as you see in the diagram over here.
No, actually, I agree with you. I just wanted your thoughts on that. Just it's something I deal with. And
that's an interesting case. That really is, Jason. That's the only way that would work from a physics point of view.
So can I ask you something else? And I'm getting off the topic of VCOM, but this goes back to VCOM. So one of the criticisms I also heard about VCOM is that how's this any different from like Theravent or Provent? I know what my thoughts are, but I'm interested in hearing how you respond to that.
That's just, I'm sorry, but I mean, they're just so different and not even relatable that, and this is what happens. People think they know things, and then they go out and talk about it, and it's just, so first of all, Provent.
That was the same. Your reaction is the same reaction I had. Like, they're not even the same thing. Like,
one's a resistor in your nose that builds a flow dependent EPAP, and has no effect on inspiration. The other is a resistor in a PAP circuit away from you that's basically just knocking down inspiratory pressure without affecting expiratory pressure, the VCOM. One is only used in a PAP circuit. The other one, you don't use PAP. I mean, I guess you develop an intrinsic, EPAP, because as you blow across it, the resistance builds back pressure. And the cool thing about these nasal EPAP devices, uh, there's the Briggs device by Jeffrey Sleeper, and then Dr. Hakeem out in Arizona, his device called OptiPillows or something like that. I probably gave the wrong name. And they have headgear, with that goes in here. And what's amazing about them is they're only giving pressure in early expiration because they're flow dependent. So as expiratory flow goes away, there's no pressure, there's no therapy. There's no therapy at end expiration, which is the critical part, yet they still can provide therapy for some people. And what that tells you is the viscosity of the airway, that we've been wrong also as a field, thinking the airway is elastic. With the Starling resistor and all these different models we've used through history, thinking it's elastic, that it moves, immediately, like a balloon changing shape as you increase pressure in it. No, it's like memory foam that you push in and it takes time for it to come back. So that EPAP, that an early in expiration, pushes the airway open and it comes back slowly to where, when inspiration begins, it's still stable enough, in some individuals. So there's a viscosity factor, that there's a time element, like with KPAP. I'm sure you've heard of KPAP. That's the ultimate. VCOM was just my way of kind of introducing the topic to the field. Well, with KPAP, I have to give the pressure to treat everyone. I have to give it towards mid expiration. I can't give it at the very end. It'll treat a lot of people, but not everyone, because of the viscosity of their airway. There's not enough time to open the airway. So therapy is not just a pressure, it's pressure with time. It takes amount of time, like, to give it. Now, I don't need to give it an early expiration. I give it in the latter part, and I can treat everyone. But that's because of the viscosity of the airway. So you got to think of it more like memory foam than a balloon, as far as pressure making immediate changes to it. So that's what a nasal EPAP device does. It helps reinforce that concept. The VCOM has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. That's actually what, so you kind of skipped ahead. One of my questions I had, KPAP. So KPAP stands for basically PAP at the right time.
Kairos, yeah. Kairos is a Greek word I've loved for years and years. We don't have the word in English. It means at the right time. And Hippocrates in 430 BC used the word to talk about, in medicine, the right time of therapy. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. We got to have that, So Kairos, and Kairos is a word in the New Testament as well, and people can look it up. But it just explains that we're giving the pressure just at the right time that you need it, and not, torturing people with all that pressure earlier in the cycle to make it more natural. That's a term we need to talk about, more natural, to
And you
breathe in a
said,
more natural way.
you said that right time is halfway through exhalation. Is that what you think?
Halfway through, sort of after peak expiratory flow. So, as you start to blow out, you have your peak flow, then the flow fades away. And we tend to, if you raise that pressure during that flow going away, that tends to be the part to do it. It's most comfortable for most people when you give it late, but it's not therapy in everyone giving it late. Because of that viscosity of the airway, we're surmising that it takes time, not just pressure, because it's not just elastic. If the airway was just elastic, I could give it just right at the end of expiration. Boom, it'd pop open, and you'd have therapy. But that works in some, but not in others. As you said, not everyone's the same. We're finding that too, that not everyone's airway is, and depending on the side of obstruction, there's a different reaction to the airway and other factors. And I guess what we're doing with the first version of KPAP, where we're dropping 5 centimeters and we're giving it sort of mid expiration, that we know is therapy in everyone. And our randomized trial, just showed that. There are individuals, we can drop them 7 and 8 centimeters, and
So
they
it's
still
like,
maintain therapy. We can give
it's
pressure later and they still maintain. And later versions of KPAP will allow people to titrate that for optimum comfort. But right now, what we're going to release next year, we're making sure it's therapy for everybody.
So right now, would you describe KPAP as like literally reverse bilevel? Is there an inspiratory pressure, or does it drop to zero?
No, you have to maintain inspiratory pressure of some
Okay.
amount. because the fact, again, this viscosity of the airway. If the airway was purely elastic, I could go from 0 to 12, boom, and then pop that airway open and you're set. But because it takes time, so as I drop the pressure, it's going to, I can't drop it too much, or it's not going to have time to open back up again. I'll show you what it really is doing here.
Sure.
Move ahead. Let's look at the bottom first. Here's your flow loop. So here's inspiration. The area under the curve would be your volume, your tidal volume. So this is flow, this is time down here. And then this is expiration. You can see where peak expiratory flow is, and then it fades away until you get ready to breathe in again over here, right? So CPAP would be a straight line right across here as far as pressure. See that? CPAP would be a straight line. Let's say this is 10 centimeters. All right, so CPAP would be a straight line. Bilevel would be like 12 up here, come down and go over to 8. EPR would be 10 here, maybe drop to 7 and go over. Okay. Now, this is what we're doing. This, you see how it has the initial drop and then a second drop, and then it stays down across the inspiratory expiratory border there, which is huge. And then of course it comes back here after you reach peak expiratory flow. And then this is the therapy pressure. So we define two pressures we have in KPAP. There's TPAP, which is therapy pressure, and that's it right here. And then there's relief PAP, RPAP down here. So there's two pressures. The auto PAP or the sleep technologist will titrate the TPAP, the therapy pressure. This is the therapy. This is what you titrate in the lab. This is what would equal the CPAP. All right. The RPAP will be something you set how many centimeters less. So let's look through this. So you start off as you're breathing in and you have this first drop, which is very characteristic of VCOM. It's going to drop. You can set it 1 or 2 centimeters. The max is 2. And it's flow dependent drop like a VCOM is. So it's not a straight drop like bilevel. It's flow dependent, which feels smooth and comfortable. Now, once you get up here and you reach peak inspiratory flow and you're getting your breath in, so you don't have air hunger, we drop it again. And we drop it between 1 and 3. And of course, the max is 3, which would be 2 plus 3, which is 5 centimeters. So this is down 5 centimeters as you cross into expiration. Now, this is what makes it so wonderful, is because your pressure's 5 down, you've loaded the lung up here, you can recoil in a more natural way. There's less force resisting the expiration. Okay, and that's what is so incredible. If you use C-flex or EPR or bilevel, your pressure is going to be up here where when you begin expiration, and you have to exhale against it, trigger the device, and then it falls. Okay, here you don't have to trigger the device. You're already reduced 5 centimeters, and why it's so comfortable. And then it goes on and stays down until you get past your peak expiratory flow and you've dumped your air out. So, the work of inspiration, the work of expiration is mainly done. And then it slips up here and stabilizes the airway. And this does two things. This pushes the airway open, like we saw the size. It optimizes the diameter. It minimizes the obstruction and the resistance in the airway. It also increases end expiratory lung volume, which creates the tracheal tug, remember that it's not, CPAP works not only, by force pushing the airway open, it's lung volume. And that's what separates it from oral appliances, Inspire and everything else, is it pulls down and stiffens the airway walls. By stiffening the walls, you decrease the compliance of the walls, you make it harder for it to obstruct and narrow. So that's what it looks like.
God,
We're coming to market late next spring with our CPAP devices with KPAP on it.
Do you use CPAP yourself, and have
do.
you personally tried it? And what are your thoughts of it?
I personally, I wear it every night.
So you're holding out on me with the.
I've got devices. I mean, I collect data on myself every night, monkeying with it, playing. But look, KPAP was perfected this spring. This is the perfection of it. We're going to have later versions where where a respiratory therapist can vary all these factors to optimize the comfort. We have what's called a K ramp, to where it starts this return here. It starts way late, And then when we detect sleep onset or when 20 minutes passes, it moves back here to this position, because once you're asleep, you're not there. It's a little more comfortable out here, although this is much better than CPAP. So we have different variabilities of it. You could be able to optimize what you want for the first drop and the second drop. There's all kind of cool things you can do to it. But KPAP's been perfected. I mean, we perfected it before we started our trial in late April. And in fact, the paper submitted actually today, we turned in the reviewers liked it, and we had just minimal little changes to make, and we're sending it back today. It'll probably be out in a week. So KPAP's done. What I've been working on night and day the last several months is a new APAP algorithm, because APAP just inherently, it doesn't make sense to begin with. And so that's what I've been that's what's taking all my time. KPAP's done. I've worked two years on it, and it's ready to come to market next year. I've just been playing with APAP.
Okay. So with KPAP, is it something that you don't have your own machines, right? You're working with other manufacturers.
Oh, these will be our machines.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a prototype or something that I can try out for just a short period of time?
Yeah, we have about 15 research prototypes. Now, these are the ones we do studies with. Now, these machines can do all kind of different stuff that are not commercial, but we have put it in two different manufacturers' devices, of which to do some trials. So I could we could get you enrolled in one of those.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Certainly we can let you breathe on it. We've taken it around the world, let key opinion leaders at all over breathe on it, and gone through the science with them.
Yeah, that'd be great if that could happen.
Where do you live, Jason?
I'm in the Sacramento area of California.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a great
I was at Stanford a few months ago. I was fairly close to you.
Yeah.
Could have done it there.
I was probably there for one of my kids' basketball tournaments in the same area.
I was there to let some of the leaders breathe on it.
So I have one more question that is somewhat I don't even know how to phrase this, because it sounds like you're, for the most part, anti-bilevel. Is that fair to say?
No,
for most people.
I love bilevel if you need to ventilate someone.
If you need to ventilate,
I don't see any reason to use it. Unless you had some rare case like you're talking about.
I think it is rare
for sleep apnea.
Yeah,
sleep apnea, you need to stent the airway. You don't need to ventilate them. Bilevel is to ventilate someone. The IPAP can't open the airway. That we knew that back to the original studies, that it can't open the airway. It doesn't increase airway diameter. All right, so
can I run this random scenario by you? And
sure.
This has happened with, I'm going to say, conservatively, probably 6 to 7 people that I've worked with.
Okay.
So exhausted CPAP doesn't work. CPAP with VCOM does not work. CPAP with EPR does not work. Leak looks great. They moved to bilevel. Bilevel, there's some improvement. This is with all of them. And by the way, they all have different comorbidities. These people are basically, they're all somewhat different. Tried different levels of, we tried different levels of IPAP, EPAP, different, with Easy Breathe On, with rise time, altering the settings there, threw in a VCOM. All of a sudden, their breathing pattern is just crystal clear, and they feel absolutely great. And before that, it was like fighting central apneas, fighting under titration with frequent like hypopneas or RIRAs. Just could never get the balance right. Throwing the VCOM in, to me, all it seemed like it would do is decrease the rise time and decrease the pressure support. But if I did that manually without VCOM in, I didn't have the same results. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, or if that's just way too random.
Well, it's kind of random, but in general, you were using a BiPAP ST, I guess, if you were adjusting rise time.
Yes.
Okay, so
actually, no, some of them were with a V Auto. So if you turn off Easy Breathe, rise time is there. But yeah, some of them were ST.
Okay. Well, in general, what VCOM does is it drops inspiratory pressure. And therefore, if it drops inspiratory pressure, it can drop the flow of inspiratory flow because the pressure gradient's less because it's dropping that. And when you, like, for instance, we do not recommend using VCOM with a bilevel because of the fact that, you know, we're concerned someone who needs ventilation, we would knock down inspiratory pressure, knock down their pressure support, knock down their tidal volumes, and, you know, could be an issue. It is interesting that I've put pulmonologists, you know, on pressure support, and with a VCOM, they liked it. And in theory, the VCOM sort of knocks down the rise time, like you said. It because it's flow dependent drop and not an immediate drop. It's perceived as more comfortable. And I can't really. I've done no studying. I only have anecdotal experience with it, so I really can't answer any more than that, other than to say, in general, only in the hands of professionals should you use that with a, you know, someone who knows.
Well,
you know, I'm just saying to sort of, so I'm not.
For sure, understood. Yeah,
that people aren't out there doing it, because, you know, you could, if you're trying to ventilate somebody, and you know, that needs to be handled by. That's a whole different world. That
So
needs to be outside of all the forums and everything else.
Yes, I would say these people did it on their own accord. I would. So to me, bilevel and VCOM, it's like the Hatfields and McCoys. They don't get along. It doesn't make sense.
VCOM's just knocking down the inspiratory pressure. So here's where VCOM could hurt you. If you have obstructive sleep apnea and you're on bilevel, only if you're on bilevel, and you, well, I guess could be with EPR too, but if your expiratory pressure has been dropped and your airway now is smaller than it needs to be, but you're giving higher inspiratory pressure to force air over that obstruction. You remember, that's what I was talking about, the whole backwards approach.
Yes.
Now, if you put a VCOM in there, all right, and you knock down the inspiratory pressure, you knock down the pressure support, then you could lead to hypopneas. You see what I'm saying? Because
absolutely.
Because your airway is already too small, and you were trying to, you know, force more flow over the obstruction. You know, what we recommend is you titrate them to a CPAP level that treats them. All right. That way we know that EPAP's right. Then you give VCOM 1 or 2, some use 3, to drop the inspiratory pressure to make it more natural, and they maintain their therapy, because VCOM, you know, doesn't affect expiratory pressure. And I guess unless you were on a higher pressure and had used 2 VCOMs or something. Right. But that's how we treat in our labs. And with our autopaps, we don't use any EPR, any C-flex, or any of those likes. We don't use any bilevel, and we use VCOMs, and we're finding it's been a lot easier.
I would agree. It's been very helpful.
But KPAP, you know, is light years VCOM. You know, VCOM is just a dumb resistor that, you know, introduced this concept to the world. Now, right now, it's the best thing we got. Till KPAP comes out, we give everyone VCOMs, and some DMEs are doing the same. And React Health is offering that to people. But when KPAP comes out, you know, VCOM will disappear.
Yeah. So just to be clear, to go back to the bilevel thing, I would never say to put a VCOM in it, but these people did it on their own, and they said, hey, look at my data. And I'm like, it looks great. What happened? And they're like, put a VCOM in. And I'm like,
well, it will get rid of the.
I was forced to think, like, what, I have to make this make sense now. I have no idea what's going on.
Well, no, it'll get rid of their centrals, because it knocks down the inspiratory pressure. So it knocks down the pressure support, which is augmenting their tidal volume. And in those high loop gain, they can trigger and have tech support or
absolutely, which is why after it, to try to make it make sense, that's when I said, hey, let's try decreasing your inspiratory pressure to try to do what I thought the VCOM was doing. But their data, their breathing pattern looked horrible. Centrals came back. So then we put it back to the original settings, threw a VCOM in, and all of a sudden it totally goes away. So it'll just have to remain one of life's mysteries.
Well, but you know what you're doing you know, and you're trained as a sleep technologist. I mean, and you have an extensive background, and you're trying to help people solve their problems and troubleshoot. And you know, if Bilevel, if they can wear a Bilevel, if they can't wear anything else, give them a Bilevel.
Right.
You know, at the end of the day, we want the patients treated. I'm just saying that would be well, I don't know if we'd even go there, but because
It's
I
like
would think it'd be anecdotal.
it's
You
a
know,
10-second Hail Mary for sure. It's
so I
like,
mean, it's the fact that it never improved adherence in a randomized trial. Um, and so we don't really know why. I have a lot of ideas, but look, let's not go back anymore. You know,
yeah,
let's not go backwards. Let's go forward. Here's what we have coming forward on the screen. And this is exciting. Just think that we can treat people with the same therapy, giving them 5 centimeters less pressure. I mean, that's remarkable. And by the way, in the KPAP trial, the randomized trial, they're half the night on CPAP, half the night on KPAP, you know, while they're asleep. They don't know the difference. And they're randomized, you know, one first or the other, and to compare therapy. And what we found, even though these are all long-term users, averaging, you know, 7 hours a night, that they had half the leak during the time they're on KPAP than they were on CPAP during the same night.
yeah,
During
I
the
can
same
see
night,
that.
wearing their own mask from home. And you know, the VCOM decreased by a third in those 100 patients. And these 50 patients, KPAP decreased it by half. And these are people who have, you know, well-fitted masks that they use all the time. So I think that's a real testimony, because leak is the biggest problem. You know,
Agreed.
anytime you have a pressurized system, leak is the thing you worry about.
Yeah, 100% agree. Um, so you're also okay now. You piqued my interest with APAPs. APAPs are the bane of my existence. I hate them with a fiery
Well,
passion.
you're a sleep technologist. You should.
Not even if they did it well, I'd be fine with it, but they don't. Like none of them do. They're all too passive in how high they take the pressure. Then they back off when they get close, and I really legitimately have yet to see an APAP actually work. Um,
Well, they do, and I would say in over half the patients, our data suggests uh, that they do a good job. Uh, the whole idea of them is flawed, though. The whole concept of it is flawed, and that's my frustration in having to do this APAP algorithm, is because it's kind of like I said a couple of weeks ago, APAP sucks, and the one I'm making is going to suck too. And all I'm trying to do is make it suck less than the others.
Less.
Now,
Yeah.
next year, I'm going to come out with a revolution in it, and then it's going to be great. But for right now, you know, having to go through the FDA, I have to do a clinical trial,
Right.
and it drives me nuts that they all stink.
Now,
And
is
the whole
there?
process of it's backwards. Oh, by the way, quick plug,
Yeah.
Dr. Rich Berry, University of Florida professor. Everyone knows Dr. Berry in the field. He's doing a presentation. It's the third in our Discoveries in Sleep Apnea series next week. And Akami can send you a link to send out. It's going to be on APAP. He's going to talk about all the problems historically, the good points of it, and about what our opportunities are in the future to make it better. So that's next week's great talk. I've actually seen the slides.
Oh,
We
good.
got
I'm
got
looking.
him
Yeah.
back. He's so detailed. He's such a nice guy. So get everyone to sign up for that. But basically, with APAP, the problem is you only have a flow signal. You know, with a
Right.
home testing device, you have flow, you may have effort, you may have photopleth. You could be, you don't usually have brainwaves with the home, although with Onera, I guess you will. But in an in-lab, you have 14 channels. So on an in-lab, let's talk about in-labs. We argue about hypopnea rules, but you know, you can have a decreased flow of 30%, but unless you have an arousal or you have a 3% DSAT, then you don't have a hypopnea. All right. So Dr. Berry had a study back in 15 that they showed the positive predictive value of APAP events is 0.56, meaning that 56% of APAP events that are detected are real events, according to PSG. That means 44% are not. And that's the whole problem. They're pretty good at apneas because, well, they measure it the same way with flow,
Right.
but they're not very good with hypopneas. And they're always going to over predict because they have nothing to exclude that flow decrease because they don't have brain waves or pulse ox. Got
Yeah.
you? So they always say, oh, well, APAP drops the pressure when, you know, you're going out of REM into non-REM or when you go on your side. It's baloney. The reason they have to drop the pressure is because you have 44% more events that you're detecting. Everyone would titrate up to 20 and stay there. And so it's because it's only flow. And you have one referee in the game, you know, and if he
Yeah.
misses the call, guess what? If he misses an event, well, he missed the foul, but did that foul really happen? You know, and that's the problem. So you're looking at these residual index makes me laugh because if it misses the event and doesn't titrate up, well, it won't score it as an event either. So it looks like you're treated well. And the opposite's true. If it's picking up events that didn't happen, well, it's going to over titrate you and you're going to think they're under titrated. It's just
Yes.
the whole concept of it is what's frustrating to me right now as I'm, trying to, as my engineers and I are working to constantly try to improve our algorithm. And
Yeah.
we have ideas that are doing it, but when you only have the one parameter flow, you really can't compare to 14 channels.
Yeah.
It's just
For sure.
it's not a fair game. Make sense?
Oh, that's all I preach about, like on my YouTube
Good.
channel. That's about it. And
Well, good.
unfortunately, it seems like most of the physicians are. You get them into the office. Hey, well, looks like your AHI is 0.23. Well, why am I so tired? Just keep using it. It'll get better. But it never does. And
Thank you.
so,
Thank you. You
yeah.
have to go by symptoms. And then when you have
Well, even ignoring symptoms, if I look at their data, I can see, oh, you're waking up here from a decreased airflow. You're waking up here, and it just goes on and on. And then if I take that pressure, there you could just say 95th percentile, just as a whole, increased by 1.5 or 2 centimeters of water, and all of a sudden they're doing much better, so long as leak is controlled for. I would say they consistently under titrate.
under titrate. That's interesting. Well, I'll tell you. So I'll show you another little slide here.
Hit me with it.
Oh, you're going to love this one here. I wasn't planning on showing
By
you.
the way, while you're pulling it up, have you subscribed to my channel?
I don't know if I have.
We'll
Oh,
have Cammy do it.
okay. Uh,
I'll handle that when we get off.
You too, Cammy. Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
all right.
I think I have. I think I did.
All righty. Let's see.
But from your husband's account too.
We'll send
All
it to
right.
everyone.
With Teams, I just click once. I have to click twice here.
I'm sorry you had to.
All right. No, you're great. So the black line is ResMed. It's an AirSense 10.
Yeah.
The gray line is Prisma. That's Löwenstein.
Yep.
In Germany. And the red is Philips DreamStation. Now, the solid line is with no leak. This is on a simulator. Okay. The solid line is no leak. And the dotted line is with a leak that's established that increases as the pressure goes up. We'll talk more about that. And what they did, they let them be steady state for 3 minutes, which is 180 seconds. And then every 60 seconds, they simulated a hypopnea, okay? A 12-second event, all right? This is the hypopnea one. And you can see ResMed just goes to town. I mean,
Yeah.
every event they get out here. For apneas, it's even worse. See up here, the apneas, it just keeps going. But what's interesting is if they have leak, look, it stops titrating. So when you say they under titrate, it's because they have leak. If they, well, as far as the ResMed device, and that's pretty much the choice out there.
That's what I deal with almost exclusively, and I would actually say that's still not true.
Okay, well, if they don't have leak, it's going to, I mean, look, as someone who's used these clinically for all these years, classically, what we always say is ResMed over titrates and Philips under titrates in general. And you can see here, Philips does. What I think is interesting about Philips is, look, even with leak, they react very, very much the same. That's some good engineering. That's hard to do because I'm telling you, I'm dealing with it myself. That's good. And of course, my engineers are all ex-Philips, but I mean, that's good stuff. Now, the Löwenstein makes no sense to me here, especially up here on the apnea one. Look, they've got to have like 6 events before the pressure starts to go up. And look, with leak, it makes it titrate up even more. So I don't understand. But this is bench testing. And of course, this is reproducible. Humans are much harder to tell from. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, our general thing is they over titrate. The whole, trying to find my mouse here, the whole point of, the whole theory behind APAP is it's going to over titrate because it's going to pick up 44% more events.
So it just in my own experience, it seems untrue. This doesn't seem right, but I would have to say these are not people that are hitting rock bottom and asking a YouTuber for help. So I would love to see more data on someone who's happy with APAP and see what their data actually looks like. But I've always found even ResMed under titrates, and then Respironics to me had always severely under titrated, even more so than like the ResMeds.
Well, it reacts less, as you can see in those
Yeah.
to the and I'm having mouse troubles. This is working, but it's not reacting.
Has this meeting been that long that your mouse ran out of battery?
Well, I haven't replaced the battery in a few months. No, it's I'm just technically limited. Pretty good theory, but as far as pushing buttons, no. So yeah, so your views on APAP are we need to do a better job. Now, I need to say this very clearly. In the hands of experienced sleep specialists, whether they're mid-levels, physicians, respiratory therapists, sleep techs, people who are used to seeing patients in office and dealing with this, you can do a pretty good job managing them. The thing I'm concerned about is 60% of CPAP prescriptions or APAP prescriptions are now written by non-sleep clinicians. They're written by people outside the field, and these patients are just left on 4 or 5 to 20 indefinitely. And they wouldn't, some little thin lady comes in on 17 centimeters, they wouldn't know she was over titrated. And she can't tolerate it. They would, that's my bigger concern.
Right.
Because
yeah,
my peers get around all this. They figure out, they put them in the lab, they do something, they understand all this.
I wish instead of just going by the AHI reported by the machine, they would actually look at some of the waves. Because to me, I know doctors don't look at the waves all day, like techs do. That's pretty much all we look at. If there is a way for them to just take a quick look, and you can really usually pretty quickly discern what pressure, or at least a better pressure range to use, instead of going by the basically like what is the machine spitting out? Okay, that's what we'll do. Because it goes to the flawed APAP algorithm, in my opinion, and too much reliance on it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Robert Thomas, my friend up in Boston, he did a study back in 22, him and his fellows, and they looked at, they printed out the waveforms. Of course, you can only do that really with the Philips at that point.
Yeah.
And they printed, like, if you took the SD card, I guess you could with the others. But they took the waveforms and they human scored it compared to the machine scoring, and they found considerable difference. And I think that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a lot more than the detailed download. Okay, that's where you print out the whole night.
Yeah, every
go through and score it yourself. And that's what we're hoping to let people do in the future.
And that would be great. Well, I'm butting up against my next meeting. I feel like I'm really interested to see how this goes, and I would love to try it out. Like, if you're serious about that, just letting me breathe on it, a KPAP.
Sure, we can arrange that.
Would love it. Would love that. I just really want to say thank you for your time. I know you're a busy guy.
Jason, I want to say thank you for trying to help people. CPAP's a necessary treatment that's hard to wear. Despite all our efforts, about half can't do it long term. And, just think of everyone you work with, and you're able to use your experience and everything to get them able to wear it. It's real important. So I appreciate what you're doing, and trying to educate people and getting them exposed to new things, even crazy things like what I'm proposing.
You know what? I have to, not to make this a love fest, but I feel like what you're doing is so important. I'm just a lowly sleep tech. No one cares what I have to say.
That's true.
It kind of is, though, because you have You do. You have an MD after your name. That's important. You're doing your own research. That's very important. So you can get the ear of your peers who are MDs in the whole sleep medicine field. What am I going to, I'm not going to do anything. So I can just complain about it. But if someone like you kind of takes the reins and starts to get people really listening, I think that's where this is actually going to finally progress.
Well, I appreciate that. My main goal in all this, which is sort of difficult probably for the other manufacturers to understand, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to have to make machines and masks and do all this. I would rather just give the technology to someone else. But my goal is to put this on my own patients, put them on the patients in Middle Tennessee and friends of mine and colleagues around the world that, to let them have it for their patients. That's what's driving me.
Mhm.
And I was talking to, Dr. David White. He was here staying the last couple of days, and our CEO and our other leadership in the country, in our company, in SleepRes, and we, we're having fun. I mean, we're working really hard, but we're having fun, and you can't ask for more than that.
I don't know what your tolerance is to it, but this will be posted on YouTube. I'm sure people are going to have comments that are both positive and negative. If you don't mind, if you could stop by, or a representative of SleepRes, maybe answer some of the questions that are asked, because I don't want to be the mouthpiece for you, since it's not my thing. But if you could do that, I would appreciate it. But if not, I totally understand.
Well, we'll get Cammie and Tony to look at that and see what happens. I've never gone to any of the forums or anything, so
I'll try to not fight. I'll try to not fight with your people.
No, they like a good fight.
and we have to be clear here. It's possible that KPAP may not increase adherence. Okay, we could just be 30 years later with a new idea like BiPAP, and which turned out not to increase adherence. We may be in the same boat. It's more comfortable, maybe fewer side effects, but it may not increase adherence. So until we complete those trials, we're certainly going to be more reserved about it.
It probably won't for everyone, but it probably will for a whole lot of people. So I think it's great. It's another option. Like, that's fantastic.
I hope so.
Yeah.
A lot of work, a lot of time's gone into this. I hope it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Noah.
Thanks, Jason.
Clean your stinky mask with some Mask Bright, available at Amazon. And time for an extra thick thanks, buddy, to my top level supporters: Doug Toombs, Jason Georgiades, Patricia Espelong, Stuart Hetherington, Alan Liu, Chung Chu Chen, Edward Steiner, and Teddy Stegman. Probably messing up the pronunciation, but it is what it is. I'd like to say thank you also to these people, you get a shout out, as well as barely those other people. Screen, but still appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.